We've all been there. Except for me, I've never died in this game. And chances are, you're more worried about it than anybody else is. When my teammates go down, they're always like,
I'm so sorry. I failed you. You trusted me. And I failed you.
But really, it doesn't matter. I have never had a party not want to revive someone or carry them. It's just a part of the game and the way things work. It will be your turn at one point or another to be carried. I personally went from playing my best in Hazard 5 to dying constantly on Hazard 3. But it's never really that bad for anyone else. It's always the person that goes down that is the hardest on themselves. I don't even think it necessarily makes you a bad player. It could just be something as simple as one of the tips in this video, like your game settings, that make a huge difference. So even though it really doesn't matter how often you die and nobody is judging you in a game like Deep Rock Galactic, here are some tips on how to avoid going down. In context, we're talking about situations where death is very easy, no shield missions come to mind, and group Hazard 5s or Elite Deep Dives also count. We also have to remove things like fall damage, friendly fire, ping, and even just bad luck. These things will happen, and sometimes unfortunate situations can just cause you to die and there was really no control over it. But now we look at the things we can control. First, I would suggest trying a higher FOV, as I've witnessed many people be blind to the things that are all around them. The higher FOV will allow you to spot danger at a wider field. There's a video on this in more detail in the description. Second is understanding aggro and how the enemies of Deep Rock move. When I'm on the ground, everything in the area is headed towards me. But if I'm not touching the ground, they'll move away. So one trick is to simply give yourself some space by occasionally jumping on a zipline or a friendly neutral creature of Deep Rock, just to get the bugs to move away from you, even if it's only for a few seconds while you wait for your shield to recharge. This is another reason why engineers will usually build platforms that they jump to back and forth, because things like dreadnoughts, haunted caves, oppressors, they just take forever to start going in the other direction and never really getting to the original platform that the engineer was on, because they're always jumping around, confusing the enemies, making them go in different directions. Manipulating your enemy's movement can be very effective, not only for defensive purposes, but for offensive purposes as well. Leading enemies into turret or crossbow traps can be very helpful. Things like proximity mines, sticky flames, and the driller's goo puddles are excellent opportunities to lead enemies into those traps and have a better overall synergy with your teammates. Although this is dangerous, a side note about aggro is when you're the one being aggroed by a dreadnought, consider keeping its attention while the rest of the team take advantage of the opening. Because if you move behind the dreadnought, it will just move with you, and now everybody is moving in circles. But if you instead hold the dreadnought's attention while your team can focus fire, this will increase the speed in which you kill the dreadnought, giving it less time and less chances to down you or your teammates. Understanding how to manipulate your enemies will no doubt be a big improvement to your overall survival. Thirdly is shield management. This is not something that is a habit of Deep Rock because it's not always necessary, but it's simple. I use the Halo shield technique of simply taking cover when my shield is low. If I'm going to be hit by an enemy, I want my shield up to protect my health, so when it is low, it's time to maneuver around until it comes back. Most of your Deep Rock Galactic experience, you wouldn't have to do this. You can just kill everything before it gets to you. And those enemies won't do the same amount of damage, so even if you make mistakes, the game is pretty forgiving. But inevitably, there will be moments that are too overwhelming, and while your shield regenerates, your health doesn't. So simply creating this habit of immediately getting cover when your shield is down can have a big impact on your overall chances of losing your health in the first place. I find this especially useful when fighting dreadnoughts, because on harder difficulties, you really can't get hit very much. So micromanaging your shield in combat will go a long way to keeping a higher overall health. And fourth is health management. Simply avoid fighting with low health at all. Seek a red sugar mid-battle if you have to. Have a mental reminder to avoid fighting with health this low. And here's why this is a bigger issue than a lot of people realize. Most of the time you can just kill things until there are no more things to kill. Everyone dusts themselves off and then they go to fill up their health. But on harder difficulties, what's happening is that your low health is causing downs you wouldn't normally have for damage that exceeds your shields. Meaning if you take damage when you have full shield but low health, you're far more likely to go down, versus taking damage when you have full health and full shield, where you're a lot more likely to survive. Of course, this can vary, but if you are fighting a dreadnought with low health, your chances of going down are extremely higher than if you were to immediately go and get health. This is simply a bad habit from playing hazards 1 to 4, where most of the time, it's not until the battle is done that everyone goes for health, when instead, if you get health immediately after taking damage, you prevent these situations of taking damage with low health in the first place. Making this a new habit will surely make a huge difference. Simply put, if you're on the offensive with this health and this shield, just remember that you're potentially a couple hits away from going down. Act as if you're in a no-shield mission. When you're in a no-shield mission, it doesn't take long to adapt how everything can kill you. You start avoiding things more, evading way more, you actually adjust how you play because even fall damage seems to be amplified without a shield. So, just play missions as if you don't have a shield. If you do this, you will typically have more health than your teammates, because you end up honing your evade skills and building new habits. And the higher your shield is, the more likely you won't lose any health at all. When we have shields, we tend to take more risks and play a little more confidently because if you get hit a few times or make a mistake, you're probably going to be okay. But on Hazard 5 or Elite Deep Dives, the consequences of getting hit a few times is substantially different. This could literally be the main reason why some people are going down. Develop new habits. Play as if you have no shield. I know this will make a difference, especially if you combine it with micromanaging your health and shield. If you could take just those 3 things from this entire video, there will be a big difference on your gameplay. That's micromanage your shields, your health, and then play as if you have no shield. Pointless points. Identify points you're not using. Not that they're bad or useless themselves, but if you never remember to use a particular function, consider changing that point. Some examples here would be the final point on the rocket launcher that increases the damage the longer the bullets are in the air.
It's a great point.
If I'm shooting from a distance, and with some builds, I am. But on my other builds, for the same weapon, I'm really not. Basically, don't look at what you can do, but rather what you are doing currently. If you go through your build and you find that, for example, you fight close up usually, and not often from a distance, then this point would not be as effective as perhaps this one. Or maybe you're somebody that just forgets to use turret whip as often as maybe you should, so just change that point. Making these changes should emphasize your personal playstyle so you don't have to adapt. It's really quite pointless to play with perks or points that you just never use. If you do this, it should prevent you from going down in the first place because you were playing with an arm behind your back. Like you've removed those points and you played the game with nothing there. It doesn't mean the build was flawed, it just means people make different decisions based on their own habits even with the same builds. So honestly, if you are worried about how often you go down, look thoroughly through everything you have and start noticing how often you use it. If you don't use it, it's literally doing nothing for you. If this is something you're not particularly good at doing on your own, there is a trick to this that you can do linked in the description. Make sure your sound effect volume is the highest, and turn everything else down. To make my point, I'd challenge you to turn the music all the way down. Temporarily, of course, because you can obviously do this with a little bit of music volume. But in order to make my point, if you turn your music down and have the sound effects higher than any other sound, you will not only hear the very footsteps of every bug around you, but you will hear where the bugs are around you. I mean, I know when and where bugs spawn. I know when and what direction they are attacking from. I can be tunnel visioned on some nitra, and I know to move without even having to look. Being able to hear things like a leech grabbing for me or a pack of slashers sneaking up behind me has prevented a ton of deaths. Of course you can have the music playing because it's a fantastic soundtrack, but the ability to hear your enemy over everything else will definitely prevent damage you would have otherwise taken. And of course, I have to mention the survival training you can do, which is covered in my Engineer and Driller Masterclass videos. This is designed to test builds with objective results based on how long you can survive. I still do this with all of my builds to this day. I refuse to take it into an elite deep dive without testing it out first, to finally tune it for better results, or pick up new skills with the build and adapt my playstyle. Just remember, focus on your role and have fun. Reviving people in my missions is not a problem. It's also what we train for here at Deep Rock Academy.